word that operates in St. Mark, or the operative word, is straightway. It is ascribed to Mark the disciple, who had had some issues. If you read the book of Praxis, or the Acts of the Apostles, specifically he had some issues with the Apostle Paul. You know the saying, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. You know that other saying that we must be at least a postal stamp Christian, to take a licking and keep on sticking. Well, John Mark didn't seem to know these sayings, and when it got a little tough out there, he capitulated, and he had issues with the challenges of ministry. So when they went out again, the comforter and comforting Barnabas and Paul parted ways over whether to take him. But I think the book of Mark suggests to all of us, in some way or another, that God is a God of a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance. That because of God we can do do-overs. That we may not get it right the first time. But God is, I think the word is loving kindness. God's loving kindness. Anybody who involve themselves in idolatry and create a God that is mean and sadistic and evil, it looks like Attila the Hun with a big whip over him, and the second you make a mistake, he's there to zap you out of here. You do the concept of God a disservice, and you do God, you lie on God. God's interest is that you make it. His interest is to lift you up. The text says, I would that you would prosper even as your soul prospers. So all of those thoughts that come in your head that tells you you're not up to par, you're substandard, you messed up, so therefore you should give up. Know that this is the mindset and the attitude of God. That before he had one child, Adam, he built a whole solar system. He's in it to win it. He's in it for you to win. Before he had, there's no cosmic prosecutor that ever had to come to God about child support. That's a crazy statement anyway. Because there's no authority over God. And that's not by no other constraint except for the love of God. For God so loved the world that he gave all for the world, before the world. And so then, this is a testimony. The fact that we have this book is a testimony of how long-suffering God is, of the meaning of what grace and mercy is. Grace means I'm going to help you before you did it. And mercy says, I'm going to help you because you did it. And with those two dual aspects of the nature of God, we're in good hands. And that is why Paul can assert the human condition in the 7th chapter of the book of Romans when he concludes, "O wretched man that I am." In other words, there's something morally wrong with me at my core. It's debauchery. And he asks the question, who can deliver me from the body of this death? I want to use death there in the same way we use wealth versus money. Money is that item that you use to buy things. Wealth is the ability to create money. The death that Paul speaks about there is the causal element that keeps us dead and dying at the same time. So this is a terrible state. In other words, he said, call AAA, I'm a wreck on the road and I need to be picked up. But he asked the question, who? And then he answers the question, but I thank God for Jesus Christ, who is the who. And then concludes in the next chapter, because of this, there is therefore now no condemnation. I am not condemned. So if you're a Christian and you're walking around and you feel condemnation, understand that that's a feeling, that's not a reality. Because by the blood of Jesus, that blood still works. And so then Mark now writes, is credited with writing the first gospel. How can a man with those kind of mistakes represent God in the primal case, in the a priori case, in the case before any other case? He's going to write the first good news for God. God chose me in spite of. Mark writes, and
he chose Peter, Paul, Matthew, Mark, Luke.
That is a wonderful statement.
So
He chose.
only person that had the Holy Ghost when they were born was John the Baptist.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, he chose each of us in spite of.
me.
He chose me in spite of. So that's a wonderful observation, and that's a credit to God. And that really is good news, that He uses me in spite of who I am. So and the reason why I point this out as we start to talk about this is because often when we get down on our knees to pray, one of the things that hinders us from even praying is the accusation of condemnation. You're not worthy to pray because you've done this, sins of commission, sins of omission. And what you ought to say is, that's true, but I'm here because he said I should be here. And he told me not only be here, but come boldly to the throne. And I'm here because I am foreknown, I am predestinated, I am called, I am justified, and I shall be glorified after this prayer. He's going to answer me. He hears me. So I think that that's what this book represents even before we open it. Again, the operative word is straightway. And straightway. It's really interesting, the book of Mark, because we do not see it starts with genealogy as we do in Matthew. And we do not see it operate. It starts with the birth of Christ, as we see in Matthew and in Luke. Nor do we even see it beginning with the notion of logos, a word, or the eternal Christ. In the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the same, that's a Johannine concept. That's what John writes. We don't see the songs of Luke here. We don't see the genealogy of Matthew here. We see Mark going straight to the chase, straightway. He comes out of the gate healing and delivering. We see a Christ in action, we don't see Jesus at 12 years old. We see Jesus in action. We don't see the Magi coming to a toddler as we do in Matthew. We see Christ in action. And as we move on with Mark, it talks about the healing on the Sabbath day. It talks about Mark very early on start talking about the definition of Christ's family. He talks about his family calling him lunatic, and the religionists call him Beelzebub, the Lord of the flies, or this dreadful maggot god, a demon, and so forth and so on. But in this particular chapter, and I'll take a moment to just read it, Mark 8, 1 through 10. In those days, when again a great crowd had gathered, and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some of them have come a long way. And his disciples answered him, how can one feed these men with bread here in the desert? My. And he answered them, how many loaves have you? They said, 7. And he commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish. And having blessed them, he commanded that these also be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied. In other words, they came back for seconds, and some of them, I'm sure, came back for third and fourths. And they ate and were satisfied, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And there were about 4,000 people. And he sent them away. Immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha. This is a powerful passage of scripture that talks about several concepts. First of all, it talks about ministry, and it talks about pastoral care and counseling. Jesus was with this group of 4,000 plus people, and they were there intentionally because they were in the desert.
Yeah.
They, I had a friend that once said they moved somewhere where only people who intended to come to see them would, they didn't just move somewhere where they said, I was on my way. You had to be on your way there to get there. And so they were in the desert, 4,000 plus people. How did that happen? Was there a revival message that went through email, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Snapback,
Snapback, Snapchat.
It's all Snapchat, Kick, all kinds.
all of these things? Was it a flyer that was sent out? How did it happen? And what did the message say? What was the inducement? Did they say that Donnie McClurkin was going to be there to sing? What was the inducement that all of these people were in the desert with Jesus for 3+ days? And I'm assuming, just an assumption, that they did not come without food, but the teachment and the preachment and whatever else was going on went a little longer than their lunch. Can we stay with God a little longer than our lunch? What is it that we got? I heard of people going to the casino. I don't go to the casino. And some of them have a water bottle there, and some of them even, this is a terrible thought, but they put on a diaper. They want to stay at the machine, and they don't even want to get up. They just put on a diaper. It's a preposterous thought. But you walking with Jesus, and you say, I'm going to church, I'm going to church, I'm going to church. And, 4 hours, now 6 hours, now is 20 hours. Somebody went to sleep, somebody woke up. And 3 days later, you're still out there in the desert with Jesus. The sardines that you took and the crackers that you took and everything, it's all gone. And you're out there with Jesus. What a mesmerizing figure. How is it? What was it? Well, the only thing that could attract people for that long, just imagine what it would take to attract people for that long.
Yeah.
There had to be some deliverance going on, some healing going on, and the teachment must have been out of sight. What words did Jesus say to attract and hold attention for 3 days? 72 hours plus. When some of us, you speak or whatever, and if you go over in seminary, they talk 22 minutes. 22 minutes, talk about attention span and all that sort of thing. I said now it's worse because everyone has an iPhone. Everyone has a Galaxy, an iPad, and most of the successful TV shows are 1 hour long with about 12 minutes of commercial, and you got to get in, you got to introduce your thought, you got to set up your plot, you got to show who the enemies are, you got to show where you're trying to go, and only sometimes are you able to get away with a to be continued. But here Jesus is out there 72 plus hours. And there doesn't seem to be a complaint from the crowd, but because of the compassion of Christ, he says, these people have been with me for 3 days, and we're in a desert place, and they don't have any food. We need to do something about that. The point that I'll make there is that ministry is a function of compassion. If your ministry is not a function of love and compassion, there's going to be a problem. All ministry is. David brings some cheese to his brother. This 11-foot giant curses out everybody. David said, "Who is this?" And they said, "Oh, have you heard? That's the enemy. And anybody who goes up against him, Saul is going to give his daughter a lot of money, a nice house, and so forth and so on." And David said, "That's good, that's good, that's good, that's good." But the enemy once again curses David's God, and he curses David's people. That was the motivation for David to stand up and say, "God delivered me with the bear. God delivered me with the lion. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" And whenever you are set to do ministry, you got to make sure that your motivations are correct. You got to make sure that you're not doing this for a new house, or for a girl, or for a guy, or to be seen, or to be heard, or for your name to go up in lights. The starting place here to do this miracle, ministry and miracles are done from a starting place. If they're not, if there's a Machiavellian approach to it, if it starts wrong, it's going to end wrong. But if it starts right, it's going to end correctly. And so I don't care who's doing it, motivation and intent is important when you're doing ministry. Motivation and intent is very important, because that's how you get empowered to do the ministry. That's when you get God on your side. I'm doing this for the right reason. I'm doing the right thing for the right reason. Jesus had compassion on the crowd. And he had compassion on the crowd when he said, "They've been with me for 3 days. It is wrong for us to send them away hungry." When I was district superintendent, I had a pastor that came to me, and after one of the district meetings, some of his people couldn't get home. And he said to me, "I don't care, let them go home on the bus, or let them do this or let them do that." That was a problem. I was his superior, I was his supervisor. That was a major problem, because often in the church world, you see people who are unchurched who looks at the pastor and say, he's got a car that's bigger than his church and his congregation. He's got a house that's bigger than everything, and he has no compassion for the people. Well, we are representatives of God. And Jesus described God, he said, "Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet Solomon in all of his glory is not arrayed like one of them." He said, "Look at the sparrow. He does not have a plow. He does not sow seed, but God takes care of him." And we get the song, "His eyes are on the sparrow, for I know." When God confronted Job, and Job told God, "Come on, I want to talk to you." And God said, "Where were you when I did so and so?" He said, God said, "Who feeds the mountain lion? Who feeds the little baby goat? That's my job." God is a God of extreme and extraordinary compassion. And anyone that does ministry for God, anyone that is a surrogate for God, must take on God's attitude. And God's attitude is to deliver them all, to touch them all, to heal them all, to lift them all. He said, even in Old Testament, in the book of Exodus and Leviticus and those books, he said, "Don't mistreat the children. And don't mistreat the stranger, because you are a stranger, he said. And when their voice come up to me, I will hear them. God hears. When I was a child coming up, I have 18 brothers and sisters. And sometimes people didn't like us because we were black. Sometimes people didn't like us because my parents were Pentecostal. Sometimes they didn't like us because we just had a big family. People just detest. But it's one thing that I discovered. Don't mistreat children because they have a tendency to grow up. They may be the one pushing your wheelchair. Don't mistreat anybody, but you must. The issue is this. Those who have no voice, when you mistreat them, those who are fatherless, God works as a surrogate. And he becomes a father to the fatherless, a mother to the motherless. He becomes the guardian of the seniors, all of the dispossessed, the unloved, the unliked, the unlucky, the left out. God somehow then steps in the gap, and he's the one behind the wheelchair. He's the one that you mistreat. He's the one that when you left that patient there and they acquired bed sores, God sees that. And so you must have compassion. You must have, the question was wrong when the answer, when God said, where's your brother? And the answer came back, am I my brother's keeper? No, you're more than that. You're your brother's brother, and you're your sister's sister. Because the Imago Dei is in each of us. And when God looks at you, Imago Dei is two Latin words. One means image, and Dei means God. So the image of God is in each of us. There's a song say, you have your Father's eyes. And so that is why when Jesus, Christological thinking, Christ-like thinking in the 5th chapter of the book of Matthew is very powerful, because it says you're in danger of hellfire when you say Reka, worthless ones. Because why are you in danger of hellfire? Because either you're lying or God is lying. If you say I'm worthless and God say my image is in you, somebody lied. God, you're looking at God, you lied. And God said, I lied. I'm holy. I couldn't lie. I don't want to lie, but my nature prohibits me from lying. And when God gets through with that mathematical assessment of himself, he then turns around and says, well, if I didn't lie, it means you lied. And you lying on me. So if God looks at you and say, and call you little g gods, and he looks at you and say that you're not only just good in my creation, but you're very good, and then you look at me and you call me worthless and you call me all of these names, rebels, so on and so on, God doesn't like that, because he understands that you have devalued what he has valued. You have made less than secular what he has made sacred. And so the compassion of ministry only comes out of what God has in his heart for you when he sees you. When Jesus sees Zacchaeus up in the tree, he said, come down. I didn't make man to be up in trees. When Jesus sees the woman on the ground, he writes on the ground and said, where are your accusers? Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. When Jesus see the man's hand withered, he said, I did not make, I was there in creation. I didn't make your hand that way. And he did that as symbolic of what he's going to do in end time, because Proverbs said, many are the conditions of humankind, but the purpose of God that will stand. Whatever God imagined for you when he made you, that's going to happen. I don't care how many blizzards, I don't care how much trouble, I don't care what, I don't care who doesn't like you. Hallelujah. Whatever God imagined when he made you. So quit tripping over people.